Welcome to another Psychonaut Sessions, ladies and gentlemen. Your home for all things psycho. We are celebrating Halloween month this month, so we're taking a look at stories from the macabre, terrifying tales. Let me move my assistant here to the side so she'll stop creeping out the cat. And let's take a look at TABBO ESPECIAL today. So, TABOO was a horror anthology comic series, ran from I think 88 to 93, 95. uh, Primarily spearheaded by Steve Bissette, who is one of my most favorite comic creators, most definitely responsible for amazing work on Swamp Thing, Tyrant. He was part of kind of like that entourage, him and Rick Veitch and Alan Moore working together on many works, including 1963. So if ever there was a trio of creators or a group of people that I could hang out with and go back in time and be a part of that mix and chill with them, that trio of Alan Moore, Rick Veitch, and Steve Bissette, Rick Veitch and Steve Bissette most especially, I would be it. So many cool tales of them just getting a cabin in the woods, tripping on mushrooms, and making comics. Dims of the boys. Anyway, TABOO was a great anthology series. Won an Eisner Award just because its content was just really amazing. Stuff that just really stretched the imagination. Ran for about 7 issues under the Spider Baby imprint, supported by Tundra Publishing. And this is Steve Bissette's brainchild. And this is a one-shot called TABBO ESPECIAL. So it's bit thicker, so there's a lot of content in here. We'll go through most of it. I might skip through one or two things because that's a lot of stuff, but excellent works in here. The interesting thing about this is that TABOO really tried to kind of stretch the limits of imagination in horror. It's not your traditional kind of, slasher horror, scary type of stuff. It was more about kind of messing with the mind and just seeing what you could do with the genre. So props to Steve Bissette. Just excellent work. Let's take a look at this cover here. This is definitely a photograph. 2 photographs, one on each side, where they've got this really cool setup and display. Just some nice, fun, creepy stuff. If you didn't notice, they're in this TABBO ESPECIAL bottle of looks like yummy spirits. We've got a really gross looking worm here, which will be referenced in the introduction. So, got a little insert here where you could order TABOO magazines. Been nice to kind of take a look. That's so much fun. Love it. All right, so Jeff K. Potter was the one that did the front and back covers. And then inside front cover, we've got Jean Girard. So John Gerard Mobius. So excellent piece of Jack the Ripper there. I got to get my tea out of the way. I apologize. I'm not considering the camera, ladies and gentlemen. So a whole lot of great works here. We've got Rick Grimes. We've got Jeff Nicholson, Rick Mccollum, Scott McCloud. Excellent work there. Eddie Campbell. So a lot of amazing talent on here. S. Clay Wilson. So let's kind of dive in, take a look. And then first and foremost, I'm going to be very careful with this because I don't like to bend my graphic novels. So I'm going to try to be as careful as possible, but yet still give you the views that you want to see. So this is a little introduction by Philip Nutman. It's really kind of fun setup in terms of just talking about horror and what you can do with the horror genre, and talks about like what you would consider typical horror and really trying to move into another direction. So one thing I'd like to point out here, most of what is marketed as horror, be it print or celluloid, is terribly, terribly conservative, reaffirming a sense of safe reality, a reality in which the monster is defeated and Life continues at its own sweet pace. It's as predictable as riding Space Mountain for the third time in a day, but it isn't the truth. In the late 20th century, horror has become, thanks to Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Robert R. McCollum, et al., a popular folklore of things that go bump in the night, startling you from the cocoon of safety and can be swiftly dealt with once the electric light of reason is switched on. Pandora's box is open, the horrors of hell set free, allowed to run around the room like gerbils on speed, and then contained. Real horror, on the other hand, is getting blown up by a mobster's bomb and having your corpse abused by teenage fascists and would-be religious fanatics. Tortured by the KKK. Being in obsessive love with potential suitor's severed head, desiring the cold embrace of living death to keep the home fires of love burning eternally, trapped in a dead-end job with frustrated coworkers, hell, or heaven, depending upon your worldview. We won't even consider incest, a greasy punk with a switchblade standing before you, demanding money, watching a parent die of bowel cancer, having your youngest child run down by a Dodge Ram driven by a drunken asshole, or being homeless. But you just suggest those. You get the picture. This brings us to TABBO ESPECIAL. No safe, ironic EC Comics morality fables here. No reassurance, no duels with the demon from the ID, which can be dispelled by the rational scalpel of analysis. Nothing, in fact, which can be easily digested and expelled from the rectum of consciousness, kiddies. He 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 he. So here we go. Let's take a drink from the bottle of TABBO ESPECIAL. So each story actually has this like really great introduction, sometimes written with an intro by Steve Bissette, but sometimes there is no real intro other than just a biography of the person's works up to this point. And man, what was this, 92, 93? I think this was 91. It says copyright 91, but we have some things here that are showing copyright 92. So anyway, we've got an interesting image here. Let's go shopping. Pretty Twisted by Mark Martin. And then Eddie Campbell here does a quick little horror story. So anyway, Canberra health officials said yesterday that blood and human remains have been quietly flowing into the ornamental lake in the center of Australia's capital for the last 30 years. Refuse washed from the city's morgue after post-mortems has flowed down drains wrongly connected to a stormwater system. So that was from Reuters. He saw in an article in 1986 and wrote a comic about it, and the person in the comic, it's a newscaster talking about the new fountain and how wonderful it is to be in this park and families can enjoy it and blah 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 blah. Just simple, but yet yeah, terrifying indeed. And then we get Cliff's Wildlife by Glenn Barr. Glenn Barr has a pretty extensive history in comics. So a lot of work done with, say, Joe Kubert, Mobius again, Jim Woodring. So a lot of interesting items in his tenure. So been around for quite a while and basically gives us a silent comic. So interesting, fun, cartoony style, very kind of 50s modern. We just get a man in a bar hanging out. There's a car driving up. It looks like it's some sort of mobster drive-by, and a bomb gets thrown in and it blows him up. And then we get his corpse coming out, and just as was stated in that introduction, getting abused by teenage fascists, having fun with it. They play a joke. They dress up the corpse, put it on a park bench or a bus stop bench where a lady thinks the corpse leaning into her is actually interested in her. She finds out it's dead. They laugh, ha 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 ha. They mess with it some more. Just terrorizing the town, and eventually prop it up on some sort of altar and kind of fall worship it, having some fun. And then eventually we get this individual coming up who is obviously some kind of weird psycho-Satanist who seeds the altar and actually brings legitimate Satanists to come start worshiping it. Wind blows the sucker down, and he gets drug in by some random lady off the street. She starts feeding the corpse and talking to it, having conversations with it. Obviously, she's lonely, but then she gets angry because the corpse is not responding. We start to see the ghost of the fellow of this corpse, and then he eventually gets thrown out because he's not responding. He's sitting there in the trash, gets discovered by some mad scientist fellow who decides to do some experiments on the corpse. And we get to see some fun, kind of like Frankenstein, sort of insides and laboratory equipment. So he basically, long story short, he reanimates the corpse. He's happy, he leaves, he's reanimated, he is naked. He sees the young fascists that were torturing him before, so he goes and beats them up, buck naked, and then gets noticed by the cops who's sitting there watching this naked man beat everybody up, and then takes him away. He gets arrested. So really just kind of like a funny little segment. After getting killed and then reanimated, he just ends up getting arrested for public indecency after all that's happened. So next we have Rick Grimes. Responsible for a few things at this point, including Dr. Wortham's comics and stories. So some stuff there. He worked on a backup series that was in Rick Veitch's The One called Puzz Fundles, and here we get Glyceris Aquarium Footstool. Really weird feature. Not really know what's happening here. The artwork is just trippy. It's maddening. There are this is obviously a segment that has run before in other backups and features, and I think in TABOO as well. It's about a group of anthropomorphic animals that live together, but it's just weird. I don't really understand what's happening, and the artwork is just insane. It's intense. You can take a look at it here. It was a madhouse. This is a 2-page madhouse. So I'm going to move on. So we have Alan Gladfelter here, with this just a 1-page snippet of somebody talking about having a conversation with their brother and imagining killing them at the same time. So kind of a fun, weird little, scary little thing. And then we have a segment that's really probably the only, I would say, traditionally horror segment called Want, by Wendy Snow Lang. So it's cool to see a female creator in here. I haven't seen too much of her other stuff. This is actually one of her earliest things, so Steve Bissette giving her a shot. But it's about a female vampire who's with her sire, and it's all about desire, and her desire and need to have him around, and it feels that bloodlust growing inside of her, but she can't get herself to the point where she can actually take another person's life and suck another person's blood, and he's trying to convince her. This was done on black paper with white colored pencil, so it's beautiful. I love that style. It's always a very comforting style to me. It's really well done. Her style matches the tone so well. There's just some really cool aspects that she kind of wove into it, where you thinking you're just getting some kind of weird romance, and then every once in a while she'll have an image that's absolutely haunting. But it mixes in that whole kind of vampiric aspect of thirst and desire. She keeps struggling but can't help herself eventually. So it's quite a few pages. Gorgeous story. It's completely worth checking out. Very sensual. I'd like to see more of this person's work in the future, most definitely. Then After that, we get some Jeff Nicholson. Jeff Nicholson is an independent cartoonist that I think is fairly well known, especially for Ultra Klutz, and a few other things. He did some work in Cerebus, bi-monthly, and some other just offbeat stuff. But I think Ultra Klutz is the one that he's most known for. And this is I think it's supposed to be an autobiographical tale called The Doomed One. Not horrific in any way, except for the fact that it's just about life in a dead end job, and just having that, the hell of just being in one space and being unable to get out of it. So it's about this coworker that he had that always had the same job, was always complaining, always negative, just made everything miserable all the time. And despite how other people moved forward in the company, she was never able to move forward. And then she just generated her own misery. She just generated her own kind of hell, really. And him just kind of profiling her, really, just kind of watching her personality. What's really interesting about his work is none of his characters have mouths, but yet they still remain completely expressive. But by the end of it, he goes and visits her, and at the end of the day, he visits her many years later, and she's still there. She's still there, and what's interesting is their office was set up to have these like little gerbils or hamsters that just roamed around in all these like tubes and stuff. So it's that whole like hamster wheel mentality, and that's the hell. That's the horror of just years and years and years, and see she's at her 10-year mark, just being stuck in the same place, doing the same thing, being just as miserable, and just getting, bloated and settled in your misery. That, ladies and gentlemen, is horror. Okay, so Rick Mccollum. Rick Mccollum, pretty well known independent artist, I'd say. Did some work for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other Tundra stuff. He's had a career since this as well. But he did a story on Salome. So Salome is I think the daughter of Herod, who demanded the head of John the Baptist. This is a tale that really has been the interest of many creators throughout time. Oscar Wilde did a play on it. So Charles Baudelaire had a fascination with it. Gustave Flaubert's Herodias, which was like a written companion to his earlier work in 1876, talking all about Salome, and I hope I'm pronouncing it. P. Craig Russell in Eclipse Comics did a one-shot, and I'm going to cover this at some point in time. But the daughter of King Herod, who requested the head of John the Baptist. So kind of a biblical tale. This is beautifully rendered, gorgeous, and just maddening. So here she is in the court of Herod, and this artwork just blends this kind of psychedelic trip of, I think, really representative of all of the different cultures that were around during that time. When we think biblical times, we just think people in robes, but there were so many different types of cultures that were represented in that area and in that region, and we get that kind of hodgepodge of stuff, but plus just some weird, interesting things, that just kind of Babylonian flair to it all. And really weird tale. She receives the head of John the Baptist and really becomes obsessed with it, and really just it's like this macabre dance that she has with the head of John the Baptist, and the court of Herod is just like, oh my God, this is just disgusting, this is crazy, and blah 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 blah, and he orders her killed as well, and her head is chopped off, and she continues laughing in her drunken just vigor of like lust and connection with the head of John the Baptist. So really interesting tale. And then we get the burial of that head at some point in time afterward, and just this, I'm not really sure what's happening here. They bury the head, and there's this just weird kind of psychedelic trip, as if the priest who buried it, just his last words, if Yeshua is to wax, then I must wane. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Next, I Have a Dream by Mark Bode. Talks about the terror of the Ku Klux Klan. And the horrible things that they did to people. So another beautiful rendering of artwork about a family getting attacked by the Ku Klux Klan, and they have a kind of a freak of nature as one of their children that they've been hiding, kind of a mutant child that has extra appendages and things growing out of her. And of course, the Ku Klux Klan is all like freaking out over it, and so there's just this weird episode that kind of occurs where, as part of her weird growth, she has this another anal cavity at the top of her head where she spews this like kind of burning acid and burns them to death. So it's just odd story, but a lot of fun. This is the pride and joy for me. Scott McCloud, A Day's Work. Scott McCloud, responsible for Zot, responsible for making comics, reinventing comics, and the original Understanding Comics. Award-winning books, some of the best books on the creation of comics and just the philosophy of comics in general. But also one of my most favorite graphic novels, Sculpture, one of his most recent ones. Scott McCloud, to me, is a comics genius. He also was responsible for the 24-hour comic. So it was a concept that he established of just create a comic without any kind of premeditation or preparation, but create a comic with a coherent story in 24 hours. Full 24-page comic. After that, there's been like 24-hour comic days where people will inhabit a single space or a comic shop and create a comic in 24 hours, inhabiting the same space. Other creators have gone on to do that, like Neil Gaiman, Dave Sims, so on and so forth. But it all started with Scott McCloud, and this is his first 24-hour comic, and it's called A Day's Work. I had no idea actually that this was even in here when I first acquired this book. I just wanted this book because I admire Steve Bissette. I had no idea that Scott McCloud's 24-hour comic was in here. It was such a pleasant surprise. So we get our cover to the comic, or our first major splash page, and then we get someone who's waking up from an alarm and just kind of getting up for the day. I hate getting up this early, getting ready, going through the routine, showering, having breakfast. There's this pleasant little 1950s exchange. Oh, honey, hope you have a good day. And yeah, I'm really going to make a name for myself in the company. I'm very proud of you, dear. And kiss each other like Ozzie and Harriet. They leave, and it's this like suburbs where every house is the same. All the men are leaving with their little briefcases, and the wives are all saying, "Good luck, honey." They're all saying the exact same thing. So going through that rigmarole of the cookie cutter mentality, going through traffic into the city from the suburbs, goes into his building, goes to the top. It's told, "You're a slug on the way there." "Yes, sir." Goes to the top, and he interacts with his fellow coworkers, and being told to follow this one fellow, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to make six figures soon." He's taking down this dark corridor, and then there's this gallery with all these masks, and he picks out the one that he wants and says, "I'm going to choose this one for the day." Puts it on, has some insane laughter, and he takes off down the street. Right. Well, he goes through the building first, so he causes terror by jumping on desks, knocking things over, goes down the elevator, runs out, freaking out, going through the streets, runs into people, beats them up. What is the frequency, Kenneth? What is the frequency, Kenneth? He says. So this is where REM got apparently the title of their album, What is the Frequency, Kenneth? Beating up on this fellow over and over again, saying that. Climbs a building to the very top of the building. Give that man a Miller! And stares into the sun. And says, if I stare at my hand long enough, I can just go places by just looking. Frogtown, for one. Got a little town there with frogs in it. Moonbase Alpha, the old house. Tropical rainforest, Candyland, Syracuse, New York, the gates of hell. And he's still standing there, and it looks like that he's stripped down naked. And he settles on the park. I must go to the park. And he keeps staring at the sun. And it's turning black. And so we get the scene of the park. And there are numerous individuals stripped naked with these masks on. I am the dark and tumbling rock. I am the heaving breast of fertility. I am the bounty of Stop and Shop. I am the great and powerful Oz. I am the sad and lonely cowboy. I am the hoops and slats and twinks and chips. Hey guys, can I join in? Sure, Dave. What? I am the wind and rain. I am the bum that sits in your path. I am the President of the United States. And then the sun is no longer black, so there was an eclipse. And so the sun is peeking out from the moon. Back to work, guys. I didn't really understand what was happening until this moment. So the eclipse is done, back to work, and they all scatter, goes and puts his clothes back on. Time for a few more. He runs down the street, he grabs some people, starts beating them up. What's the frequency, Kenneth? What's the frequency, Kenneth? What's the frequency? Just flipping out. And then he gets back to the office. Hey, Slugger, how did it go? Put this away, will you, boy? Yes, sir. Everything went great. See you tomorrow, Barney. See ya. Hold that elevator. And then he goes home and goes through the traffic, comes home. Hi, honey, I'm home. Little kiss. Great goulash, Judith. Did you accomplish much, dear? Yes, it was a good day's work. Nighty-night. And that's it. Crazy stuff. This was made in August of 1990. Really insane stuff. But amazing work. Scott McCloud, ladies and gentlemen. Suburban Autopsy. So, interesting title here. This was actually done by Dick Foreman and Pete Williamson. So very, very much kind of this like average American sort of style about this man who brings dead home bodies to do autopsies and shows his children how to do these autopsies. A very weird world in which it seems like it's okay to just be bringing random bodies home and have your kids help bring the bodies, and the neighbors are like, oh boy, look at that, and it's just really odd story. And then we get this kid who is making fun of the main kid, or he gets made fun of because his dad is supposedly a secret agent, but it's like, oh, come on. But this kid's dad does autopsies, and he seems to be like more popular. And the kid whose dad is a secret agent is like mad at him. But anyway, the father becomes ill, and so it's up to the kids because, you know, they can't make money now, that they need to do autopsies. So they're trying to construct a way to do autopsies and remembering whenever they helped out with some. And like, well, we can do one most definitely. And they decide to go out and kill someone in order to get an autopsy done. And of course, they choose that boy who's said his dad was a secret agent. And while they're getting ready to kill him, they go over to his house and they're getting ready to kill him. His dad actually comes home, and he is a secret agent. So they end up killing him, and then, or no, they end up that he ends up killing his son because his son told everybody he was a secret agent. So they end up getting to take the boy's body anyway, and not getting in trouble, and doing an autopsy on him, and then everything was fine. Happy family. So I'm going to move through that one pretty fast. And then another one called Neon Spray, which is actually takes up the rest of the book and is more on the flip side. Some kind of inappropriate stuff, I would say, to kind of show on YouTube for this one, but the artwork is amazing and reminds me of the style that Matthew Lesniewski has done for his recent Dark Horse work, The Freak. No shading or nothing, just these incredibly detailed lines. This was this a Dutch artist? I believe. It says U.S. to Finland art cartoonist Jussi Tuomola. I'm probably butchering that, but this is his U.S. debut. But beautiful work. But it's all about a girl going through adolescence and just the kind of weird experiences that she encounters every single day, and how they all kind of conflate into this immense pressure, in terms of like her body, and how people look at her and trying to be perfect, and the pressure of commercialism, and it's an incredibly drawn story. Again, some inappropriateness in terms of showing it on the screen, and at the end of the day, I guess she passes out. She does cut herself, I believe, with razors, and ambulance comes and takes her away, and she's just still kind of all psycho and happy and just like, I want those guys to look at my legs and blah blah blah. It's a weird book. And yeah, I mean, if you look, she's just like completely cut up her legs instead of just shaving them. Just really psycho book. Another really cool image here. Some more gallery pieces. Fun book. TABBO ESPECIAL. You need to check it out. You need to check out all the TABBO books. A lot of fun. I just thought this one was a little bit more unique and special, and I really wanted to take a look at that Scott McCloud one. Really enjoyed that a ton. Anyway, here we go. Keep it safe, but also keep it scary at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, and keep it psycho.